Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Up front, I just, as you said, I am in support of the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. I'm a Rhode Island resident, retired lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, and became a clinical social worker after I retired from the military. I worked as a counselor at the VA's Vet Center in Warwick, Rhode Island from 2009 to 2018, where I provided mental health care for veterans. And in 2017, I had to file a complaint with the VA Office of Inspector General for the VA to revise their harmful clinical productive policies that compromised the mental health of veterans and also was harming the morale and welfare of their counselors. Senator Reid backed me up, had a Federal Government Accountability Office investigation launched that substantiated my allegations. The U.S. Congress passed legislation as a consequence of this to hold the VA accountable. And I've been interviewed, locally, nationally, various media outlets about this whole thing, and actually published a book about the unjust and toxic retaliation tactics that's used against me by VA leadership. The details of what they did is in my statements for the sake of brevity, just to mention that the things they did to suppress, discredit, and cancel me, tactics such as, isolation, shunning, being ridiculed, mobbing, distancing, gaslighting, false accusations that were lodged against me, even to the point where their bullying and marginalizing tactics involve filing a fraudulent police report to obtain a no trespass order against me that was later revoked by the Warwick Chief of Police through legal action when it was verified the content of the complaint was blatantly untrue. The adverse impact of these reprisals was mentally, emotionally, psychological, devastating on numerous levels, personally, medically. Again, details are in my statement. This acute distress actually resulted in me suffering from an embolism, which almost killed me as a consequence of the devastating emotional state that this caused. Social distancing. My colleagues were affected by this and outraged and intimidated, distrusting management because of how this created a hostile work environment and a fear of potential reprisals for them if they were to speak up about any of the issues I raised. In fact, a lot of them have since left the Vet Center, moved on to other employment. And I also encountered financial stress and hardship due to incurring tens of thousands of dollars in legal expenses because of having to defend myself against this defamation and malice. And overall, I just want to say that the effect of this was more traumatic than any combat experience I had. My supervisor and VA management were never held accountable. This, unfortunately, is typical in these situations. These orchestrated strategies I portrayed, unfortunately, is common practice in government agencies.
That's time. Can you finish?
Corporations, yes, and other bureaucracies. So, in conclusion, the impact of this vindictive treatment is devastating and oppressive for whistleblowers, of families, peers, and colleagues. The details I outline how this is effective, and I poignantly portray this in my book, Broken Promises, about all this, and there's another book out that details the same thing that is involved in dealing with these issues on a national level. So this kind of thing is still ongoing. Whistleblowers are still suffering from toxic reprisals, and it's scandalous, appalling that bureaucrats are allowed to continue this discriminatory, malicious behavior with impunity. So I would strongly urge this committee and the Rhode Island State Senate to support the Workplace Psychological Safety Act and to compel your colleagues in the House to do the same so that workplace bullying, harassment, and violence can finally end. This will also set a precedent for other states to follow your lead, and that's all I have, pending any questions.
Thank you, committee members. My name is Deborah Falzoy. I'm the co-founder of End Workplace Abuse, and I'm testifying in support of S2473, the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. As a survivor and longtime advocate, I've connected with hundreds of targets of workplace abuse over the last decade. I've researched, I've listened, and I hear the same themes over and over again. Employers are robbing us of all that we worked for with no consequence. And discrimination law is not enough to help us, even though so many targets of workplace abuse see a discriminatory impact. I want this legislation to pass because we deserve better. Right now, women, BIPOC workers, workers with disabilities, workers over 40, and workers in the LGBTQ+ community simply don't have adequate protections from bias that manifests itself in abuse of power, yet we're most likely to endure abuse at work. Currently, civil rights law supposedly protects us from discrimination, but not without proving intent, which the courts moved to from impact in the 1980s, and which renders discrimination law ineffective at dismantling the social hierarchies it was aimed to dismantle. It's a huge gap in the law that's existed for far too long. When we report abuse, the vast majority of employers either retaliate to avoid liability or they do nothing to address the abuse. So we see a reinforcement of a culture in which employers do as they please to keep themselves in power with little to no consequence. This bill fixes this widespread problem of inadequate protections for employees from bias that result in abuse that prevents those in marginalized groups from getting ahead. We focus on mistreatment and impact rather than intent to change the system that's keeping the glass ceiling sturdily in place and preventing the broken rung to get ahead from getting fixed. Perhaps former higher-up at Pinterest said it best when she said, they, the higher-ups who enable toxic work cultures, make decisions behind closed doors, consciously and unconsciously excluding those who do not look, sound, or behave like them. A distant, disengaged style of leadership creates an environment where underrepresented people do not have the social handshakes that their mostly male, mostly white counterparts have. Without accountability, our employers perpetuate stereotypes to keep the status quo. Our courts do the same. That leaves only one group with the power to make change around this issue that affects people's physical and mental health, careers, bank accounts, personal relationships, and even whether they live or die. That group is you. So I ask that you move forward the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. Thank you.
My name is Amelia De Silva Tavares. I am the Workplace Psychological Safety Act Director in Rhode Island, and I'm testifying in support of S2473, the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. Let's talk healthcare and taxpayers. Nothing to address the problem doesn't only affect marginalized groups. It also harms all taxpayers. Employers externalize healthcare costs when they ignore employee well-being internally. When abused targets leave unhealthy work environments, they become burdens of taxpayers. Their work environment, they're frequently uninsured, and when they get sick, they turn to ERs for care, where delivering primary care is not cost efficient. By the time they get there, their health has already deteriorated to a point where treatment expenses are far greater than earlier intervention would have been. This bill would incentivize employers to address employee well-being internally and not make it a public problem. Back up those problems. In his book, Dying for a Paycheck, Stanford professor Jeffrey Pfeiffer says, the United States experiences about 59,000 excess deaths and about $63 billion in incremental costs annually compared to what we would be predicted given its per capita income level. Considering the total toll previously estimated of about 120,000 excess death and 180 billion in costs, our analysis indicate that about half of the deaths and about a third of the incremental costs from workplace conditions appear to be potentially preventable if the United States were more similar to other advanced industrialized economies. Prevention is both less expensive and more effective than remediation. We have environmental regulations to limit environmental risks. We don't mention the human impact of abuse. We don't leave environmental pollution to discretion of CEOs. So why do we leave health up to the CEOs, when CEOs too often lead in ways that serve neither the employees, nor the public, nor themselves, when you include the hidden costs of turnover and absenteeism. The U.S. is the last among all Western industrialized nations to acknowledge workplace abuse adequately. As a civilized society, there ought to be limits on what companies can do to their people. We should prohibit companies from psychologically abusing workers. Every session, we don't act. We leave employees and employers to suffer and healthcare costs to soar.
Can I bother you to finish up, please?
Inactions cost lives, damages in the Rhode Island economy. A safe workplace benefits not only employees, but the public and also businesses in Rhode Island. Please use your power as legislators to save lives and move forward S2473, the Workplace Psychological Safety Act.
Good afternoon, members of the Senate Committee on Labor. My name is Mahir Nassar. I'm an employment discrimination attorney practicing in New York and New Jersey. My practice is dedicated to advocating for people who have experienced injustice within the workplace by seeking accountability through the legal process, because I believe accountability caters to change and helps in the healing process. It's the lack of accountability that truly worries me. When I evaluate whether or not I can help someone, I look to see what happened or whether or not it can be shown to be a violation of their legal rights. In those conversations, I listen to the common patterns of oppression, which include gaslighting, stonewalling, and silence. I hear not just the words, but I sense the deep pain and suffering of someone who is simply seeking a fair shot, but is being mistreated and degraded to the extent that they begin to lose themselves. When I recognize that I can pursue a legal claim on their behalf, I can provide legal options for that individual to consider. However, when I hear, see, and sense the pain and suffering, the loss of self-belief, confidence, and self-esteem associated with workplace bullying, mobbing, and other forms of psychological abuse that do not trigger one of the existing laws, I find myself struggling on how to tell them that there is nothing I can do to help them. The volume of people that fall into this category is by far the majority of people who reach out to employment lawyers today. They seek justice for the harm they experienced, but are told that they have no legal recourse. They suffer mental illness and its associated physical symptoms. They are not alone in their suffering. Their significant others, children, and their proximate community members all feel the impact of someone who has been traumatized. To tell them they have no legal recourse is beyond demoralizing in what they expect their legal system to do for them. If we continue to allow workplace environments to go unchecked for the psychological abuse they engage in, we'll be a nation of mentally ill and traumatized citizens. We need a mechanism for accountability to overcome the corporate oppressive tactics associated with abuse and exploitation. This is why I'm here in support of passing S2473, the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. I see the proposed legislation directs OSHA to enforce this act. I believe it should be limited to the Rhode Island Commission on Human Rights, as it must be administered and enforced by a local administrative agency beyond providing a private cause of action. Rhode Island has a monumental opportunity to be a state that provides a path to justice to people who experience psychological abuse within the workplace. I implore you to do what it takes to pass this legislation to provide a mechanism for accountability, transparency, and accessibility. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Honorable Senate Labor Committee members. My name is Vicki Cordemanch. I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 2473. I want to see employers held accountable for psychologically abusive work environments. In 2018, I walked away from my job without another lined up. The only thing I knew that morning was that I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't even know what anymore was. I made the mistake of reporting the abusive behavior of a workplace bully to HR. My employer's representative employees, that's the way they identified themselves. I was told the complaint process would unfold and an investigation would take place. I was comforted by that information. That was the second mistake I made. I believed them. Employers are not liable for psychologically abusive behavior, nor do they want to be. My work environment worsened, the bully's behavior escalated, months went by in silence, the tables were turned against me, my health declined in sync. The bully wasn't the only one mentally abusing me. The perpetrators were sitting in an administrative office building on a college campus, cashing six-figure paychecks. It never crossed my mind once that the protocol they put forth was fraudulent, nor did I ever suspect they would conspire against me. Fraud experts refer to it as the cloak of authority. If they were sitting behind bars, perhaps I would have been better able to discern. Surely that is where they belong. While I was waiting for promised resolve, they were waiting for me to snap under the stress. Snapping under stress Silent killer stress is as predictable as the sun coming up. No fingerprints, no black and blues, just human carnage. They intentionally disregarded the bully's mentally abusive behavior and intentionally disregarded my cries for help. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Today I'm here to speak about that evil. Employers cannot be held liable for issues of which they have no knowledge, so they make it go away, cruelly and inhumanely. I succumbed to the injuries highly affiliated with these workplace practices, most notably a brain injury. Bullying and the institutional complicity of disregarding complaints are premeditated, full swing operations of interpersonal abuse. Researchers, 4 decades of research, refer to these processes of dehumanization and traumatization. If I had 3 years to testify, I could never explain the horror I felt when I realized the premeditation, or when I found out that my FMLA paperwork had been contrived to infer that I was mentally ill should I dare speak out. Lastly, when I found out I had no legal recourse for any of it. I was deathly afraid of my abusers for years, and rightly so. They got away with it all, multiple crimes and violations of basic human rights under the radar of any form of viable accountability. Please move 2473 forward and stop the blatant exploitation of innocent employees. Hold employers accountable for the work environment. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today in support of S2473, the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. As an HR executive, I am privy to a lot of these backdoor conversations that we've heard mentioned a couple of times today. And I can confirm, after years of navigating investigations at all levels of an organization, and some cases investigating folks I reported directly up to, that the process is uneven. And we see that for a variety of reasons. But I think, to sum up, what we frequently see is if you're a janitor, if you're an hourly employee, if you're someone that is considered of low value, then if you do something that harms your colleagues, you'll be fired on the spot. But what we frequently see is that with chief executives, if they commit the same sort of acts, that they're given an executive coach, that the entire system is incentivized to downplay what is happening. And we see this behind closed doors a couple different ways. One is just good old-fashioned fear. You know, if somebody's getting away with hurting folks, nobody wants to engage them, particularly if they've seen that they've done this with impunity and then they know they won't be protected, or that they're risking their own jobs to try and engage with this individual. We see outside counsel that will do everything they can to try and diminish the impact, to use soft words, to try and say that they did everything according to the law when they know that that's not really anything, in an effort to limit liability. And so we have all of these things that begin to take place where complainants aren't just ignored. Oftentimes they are retaliated against. And I have worked with countless people who have faced fits of screaming, public humiliation, isolation, and mobbing. And I have seen where people have endured immediate threats to their jobs, reassignments and demotions, poor performance reviews, and other attempts to manage them out the door, all for calling out abuse. Incidents such as these can arguably rise to the level of harassment as defined by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They may meet the reasonable person standard of hostile, abusive, and/or intimidating acts. But there's just one thing missing, and that's proof of these actions were based on discriminatory intent. So unless you can tie in a protected characteristics, individuals are kind of just left because this is no longer unlawful. But the injuries are still there, and I have seen the devastating effects of abuse firsthand. I can recall one person who lost 6 pounds throwing up over the course of 3 days. I knew another woman who stopped just shy of filling her mouth full of sleeping pills because she could not take the mobbing and retaliation anymore. And then, as we've seen more recently, people do take their life. The pain of workplace abuse is not invisible. It physically manifests as frailty, cancer, broken marriages, and lost earning potential.
Can I
It's-
bother you to finish up, please?
Sure, yes, thanks. It's real and it can actually be life-threatening. I just wanted to say that I know these things not just as an observer, but I've also experienced this myself as an HR chief engaging with the chief executive where there were sustained allegations of abuse in the course of my work. I am just one person, but according to studies published by the National Library of Medicine, there are 40 million others like me. On behalf of all of us, please move this forward.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Cassie Williams, and I am here today in support of Senate Bill 2473, the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. I'm also here for my mother and for all parents who have been abused at work. You see, my mom has always been my support. She works long, hard hours to provide for me. She sacrifices her own well-being for me, and she has endured difficult hardships at work from abuse that has affected her deeply. And when this happened, she changed. Every time she came home, her head was always somewhere else. She was there, but not there. I knew she didn't sleep, and we quit doing a lot of things we used to do together. It was like she was gone, even though I still needed her. It also hurt me to see my mom this way. I know she loves people, and I know she worries a great deal about people when they are hurting. I know she stands up for others, and I wish someone would have stood up for her. Many people out there think that bullying only happens in schools, and it doesn't. Many people may also think that bullying at work only hurts grown-ups, but it doesn't. It hurts kids, and it hurts communities. So I came today because I want to be here for her the way she has always been here for me. But I also want to ask this committee to consider the kids when considering this bill. For me, my mom, and my mom kind of disappeared, but for many other kids, things could be much worse. You have an opportunity to change that, and I hope you will support the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. Thank you for your time.